Hello everyone, welcome to Pokédex, the channel where I build decks for the Pokemon trading card game. Today I decided to put my rapping career on hiatus because we're going to be looking at Breakthrough, the upcoming set. We're here on Bulbapedia, all the scans are in, so I'm going to be looking into the set. And I don't really like to make these videos go too long, so I'll jump over a lot of cards. I'll just try looking into the most important ones. We'll start with the Break Pokemon, and then the EXs, and then the normal, non-break and non-EX Pokemon, and then the trainers and item cards. Hope that sounds fine, so let's just jump right in. We start with Chestnut Break. I'm not sure if the Break evolutions you'll be able to evolve in the same turn or not. But the fact of the matter is that this is all of them are in fact another stage. For example, if you're break evolving from a stage 2, basically you're playing a stage 3 Pokemon. So this Chestnut in here is a stage 3, which it's not great, let me tell you that. Stage 2s have a lot of troubles as it is, and if you're adding an extra card on top, it has to be like really backbreaking, or else for the opponent, or else you shouldn't be playing it at all. And I'm afraid to say Chestnut it's not where it's at. As I said, I don't know if the Pokemon, if you're able to break evolve in the same turn, but Chestnut is a grass type, so it probably will be able to do that, just that, but I honestly don't think this card is good enough. It does have 190 HP, so it's more than most EXs. And it doesn't give away 2 prizes, but you have to spend 4 cards just to play the Pokemon, and the attack is not great. So 160 for 4 energy, and it does 30 damage to itself and 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. That's not great. I mean, it's simply terrible. 4 energy, it's too much energy. You would be able to put a Muscle Band in there, so it will 1-hit KO stuff, but I think it's just too much energy and too much effort because you have to play the stage 3 as we just mentioned. I'm just going to be looking into the Chestnut this guy will be put on top of, because they retain the attacks and all the other like the weakness, resistance, and retreat cost of the guy you put them on top of. So if you break evolve into the Chestnut Break, you'll still be able to use the Spike Lariat and Adamantine Press, which are both very bad attacks. So plus this guy has 4 retreat cost, which is also very bad. So yeah, I'm not seeing this card. I don't think it will be good at all. Raichu Break, so Grand Bolt, 170 damage for 3 energy, so it's 1 lightning and 2 DCs, and discard all energy attached to this Pokemon. It will be able to 1-hit KO the EXs, but I don't think this is really that great. If we look into the Raichu, the non-break Raichu on this set, it's actually much worse than the one that we got from the X and Y. So I'm just going to say that we play the Raichu that we already had from X and Y, and with that Raichu, if you have a Skyfield and a lot of Pokemon into play, you just stick a Muscle Band in there and you're already hitting for 180 damage. So you don't even need to use the Raichu Break to be able to kill the EXs. So maybe we could go like we're hitting with a normal Raichu and we can't really get there, and we play this guy down, we discard all energy, and then the next turn we drop the DC again, we start attacking again. But it doesn't seem like the greatest game plan of all time. So yeah, I don't really see it. Maybe just as a way to increase the HP, maybe that's good enough. I don't know. Yeah, maybe could be like some kind of hard charm, because it increases in the HP of the Raichu in 40. So maybe that's the thing with this guy. Maybe that's just enough to be worth it, and you keep attacking with the previous attack. That's something to keep in mind. So Marowak Break. This guy, 140 HP. It's a break from a stage 1, so it's like a stage 2. And then Bone Revenge for a Fighting and a Colorless, 20 plus, extra 40 damage for each prize card your opponent has taken. It's interesting, but I don't think it's that great. If they took like 4, it's 80 more damage, so it's... Oh no, it's 40 for each prize, so it's 4 times 4, 160. At 4 prizes we will be able to 1-hit KO an EX, so if we're playing the Marowak, I guess playing the break in there will be okay, but as the main attacker of the deck, I don't think we can do it, because it would we would have to let our own guys get knocked out before this guy starts dealing a lot of damage. Maybe we can use the Melodic or something, but this is still a stage 2 effectively, so I don't know. I don't think it's that great. I think all of these guys share the same problem, which is it's just too much work for the amount of upside that you get from them. But yeah, this guy actually does a lot of damage, so maybe the normal Marowak, though, for a single energy, 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, so he can hit the bench, which is pretty interesting for just a single energy. And then Bone Windmill, it's a pretty interesting attack. For fighting in a colorless, the 60 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is a Pokemon EX, you switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. So it's kind of similar to Donphan, but it does take 2 energy to be able to use Bone Windmill, so I honestly don't see it. If you play Donphan, you know one of the greatest strengths of the deck is just to be able to stick a strong energy in there and start dealing damage, and this guy cannot do that at all. You have to have 2 energy, and you're weaker to hammers, and you're weaker to non-EXs, so yeah, I don't think this is going to be great at all. Maybe combined with a break, but yeah, I still don't see it, to be honest. Zoroark Break, this guy for a single energy foul play, choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon attacks and use it as this attack. Now we're talking. This actually seems really interesting. For a single darkness energy, seems like a very strong attack. We have to assume that our opponent is going to be dealing a lot of damage, that is going to have an awesome attack in his active Pokemon. So foul play, being able to just use this attack seems really strong on a 140 stage 2. Not so much, but yeah, maybe it does seem like one of the best breaks that we have access so far. So if something gets played, well, it all depends on the meta and all that, but I maybe see Zoroark being played, but not really the other breaks. But the normal Zoroark also is really interesting, and that's one of the reasons why I think the break could see some play. So impersonate, once during your turn before you attack, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may switch this Pokemon with your active Pokemon. So this is Keldio's rush-in ability. Basically, you are able to just put this guy on the active position without having to retreat from your active. This is really interesting, especially since Floatstone is getting reprinted as well. So you can, if you're playing, well, I don't really think you're going to be playing Zoroark just for this ability, because I think it's too much space in the deck. You can't just play a random Keldeo and Floatstones and be able to just rush in and retreat. Even if you play a 1-1 line of Zoroark, I don't think it works that well, because there's going to be a lot of times where you just draw the Zoroark and you're forced to play a Sycamore and discard it. So it will require extra slots in the deck, which makes it so that this is not a card for every deck. But when you're actually using Zoroark to attack and to deal damage, having this ability, I think it's really, really good. So you're actually able to build this guy on the bench, and then suddenly you jump in there and you maybe use foul play and just kill the opponent's Pokemon. Mindjack, also an interesting attack. It's similar to what the Plasma Absol used to do, but this one actually has a stronger damage output, so 10 damage base, and then 30 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So if they have 5, that's 160 damage, and that's a colorless energy. So because this guy, this stage 1 is already pretty decent, I think that we can actually see some play out of the break, because in some situations it might be good. So yeah, Zoroark I think is one of the better cards of this newest expansion. Definitely one of the best non-EX attackers as far as Pokemon go. Florges EX has only an ability, no attacks. Of course, it also has 140 HP, and once during your turn before you attack, you may heal 30 damage and remove one special condition from your active Pokemon. That's interesting. I don't know if it's going to be enough just to play this stage 3 Pokemon. Does seem like really, really expensive, so to speak, to have to play 4 cards just to be able to heal 30 and remove special conditions. That's something that we can get out of items, so yeah, I don't know. And then the Florges, the normal one, each of your Pokemon's attacks cost 1 fairy less. I'm interested to know if this removes the energy cost on the colorless part of the attacks, I don't think it does. I think it only goes for the fairy attack. So if we have, for example, the Florges EX, and we have two of these Florges in play, I don't think you can attack for free. I think you still have to have a colorless energy. I might be wrong though. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see that this attack explained, or this ability explained a little bit better. Wondershine does 70 damage for 3 fairy energy. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. That's pretty cool because you don't have to flip coins, but it's a lot of energy. Of course, it costs its own attack on 1, but it's still 2 energy for 70 damage. I don't think it's great on a 110 Pokemon, and it's a stage 2. That's basically the problem. If this was a stage 1, it would be bonkers, but on a stage 2 that you have to attack with, I'm not sure. Really not sure. If this is as good as stage 2s go, I don't know, man. Doesn't seem like something that you base your deck around, because if it's a stage 2, you have to spend a lot of resources, a lot of slots on your deck. If you want to play like a 3-3 line or a 3-2-3 line with rare candies, that's a lot of cards. It's like 10 cards right out of your deck. So yeah. Noven Break for Psychic, a Darkness, and a Colorless Energy, 70 damage, and if you have the same amount of cards in your hand as your opponent, 80 more damage, so 150. That's a lot with a Muscle Band. You'll be knocking out on one hit EXs, but you have to have the same amount of cards in your hand as your opponent, and I don't know how often that's going to happen. In my own experience, it's not going to be happening a lot of times. Sometimes it will, and it's going to be really easy in some matchups, but in others it's going to be really hard. Maybe we can build our deck around it, but at that point we might be asking ourselves, why the hell are we playing this card in the first place, instead of some other Pokemon that does basically the same thing, like a Lugia or something like that. So yeah, I'm not sure about that. Of course you can use Double Dragon Energy with this guy, but yeah, it's still stage 3 effectively, so I'm definitely not sure about that. The normal Noivern as Tuning, which for a single colorless says shuffle your hand in your deck, then draw a number of cards equal to the number of cards in your opponent's hand. So it kind of has some synergy with the break, but the thing is, you use this attack, and you basically, if you have to use this attack, first of all, then it's not a 2-hit KO, right? Because you're setting up yourself for the following turn, and then the opponent has an opportunity to just play his own all his hand and just leave you crying basically in a corner if you can't do the same, because you won't be able to 1-hit KO their EXs. So yeah, it doesn't seem great. Air Slash 120, discard an energy attached to this Pokemon. That's even worse. Especially if you're playing Dragon Energy, you have to be really careful. So yeah, I'm not sure this guy is going to be used. I'd much rather just play the Noivern that we already have in the format, because at least that's going to be hard for the opponent to hit. So if we're playing this, sorry, I reopened the tab, the Noivern, and the opponent has some trouble hitting it, and then you're hitting for 150, maybe that's good, I don't know. It still feels like a lot of work just to be able to kill our opponent, and then they have to flip to kill us, but then they have the X-Minix and all that, so yeah, it doesn't seem great. So let's just jump to our EXs. The first EXs we're looking at are the Mewtwo EX. There's actually a couple of them in here. This one for Photon Wave for a couple of colorless energy, so a double colorless energy, or even maybe just a normal energy, any energy, and the Dimension Valley Stadium. Does 30 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, any damage done by attacks from the defending Pokemon is reduced by 30. That's not great. And then Cyburn for 4 energy does 120. That's also not great. Let's just hope that the other Mewtwo is better. And it says for a single Psychic Energy does 30 damage times the number of Psychic Energy attached to this Pokemon. So if you have 3 energy, that's 90. That's not a lot. That's not great. Unless the opponent's Pokemon is weak to Psychic, I don't think this is a very good attack. And then damage change. It's hard to pronounce that one. Takes 3 energy and switch the number of damage counters on this Pokemon with the number of damage counters in the opponent's active Pokemon. Unless you're healing Mewtwo EX completely, I don't think this is a very good attack. You will never be able to kill the opponent's EX Pokemon with this, because if you have enough damage on Mewtwo, or not enough damage to have Mewtwo knocked out. So if you have 160 damage, because you can have 170, or else Mewtwo would be dead. And no EXs really have 160 HP, so unless they're Shamans. So yeah, I don't think damage change is that great. So both basic Mewtwo EXs are kinda bad. I don't really know which one I would choose if I wanted to play the Magus. But let's look into the Magus. This one has Vanishing Strike as the only attack for a Psychic, 2 Fighting, and a Colorless, so we can cut 1 energy with the Stadium. That's pretty good. 150, that's a lot of damage, and then if there's any Stadium card in play, this attack does 50 more damage, and this attack's damage isn't affected by resistance or any effects on the opponent's active Pokemon. That's pretty cool. You ignore all effects, so you can actually go through something like, I don't know, Aegislash, something like that. But yeah, Vanishing Strike, we can assume that we have a Stadium card in play at all times, right? And especially if that Stadium is the Dimension Valley, because this attack would only cost 3 energy, but those 3 energy cannot be, for example, strong energy, so you will not be able to kill the Magus of your opponent. So you also need a Spirit Link on this guy. So no Muscle Bands, so you can't just hit the Manectrics and stuff like that, and it's 3 energy. I think that's a lot, and they're all different types, so I don't think that's a great problem being different types, but the fact that it's 3 energy, I think on a Pokemon that doesn't have a way to protect those energy, like Groudon for example has, yeah, I don't know. Whenever you have to actually play 3 energy without being able to accelerate by playing a double colorless energy or something like that, I'm never really satisfied with that. But maybe we can play this like as a one-off or something in a Mega Mewtwo deck. Let's see, the other Mega Mewtwo, I actually think this one is pretty good. So only 1 attack as well, and it's Psychic Infinity, starts at double colorless energy, does 10 damage, and 30 more damage times the number of energy attached to both active Pokemon. That's really strong. So if we have 2, that's 70 damage, right? So it's 30 plus 30 plus 10. Yeah, that's already more than the Yveltal is doing, because with 2 energy Yveltal does 60. So yeah, it's a really strong damage output. The fact that this attack's damage isn't affected by weakness kind of feels like they're trying hard to make the old school Mewtwo EX's battles or wars, Mewtwo wars that used to happen, don't happen again. But still, it's a very strong attack. It does a lot of damage. I don't think it will be 1-hit KOing a lot of times, because you kind of need 5 energy or even 6. So yeah, I don't think that's going to happen a lot. I can see this guy having 3 energy, but not a lot of the opponent's Pokemon will have the 3 that they need. That you need, sorry, for the 1-hit KOs. But yeah, Psychic Infinity is still pretty good, and it works, runs solely on double colorless energy. So we actually can pair this Mega Mewtwo EX with something other, like Rayquaza EX or something like that. So actually seems pretty solid. One of the best cards in the set, I'd say. As far as Houndoom EX goes, first attack, Orn Melt, discard the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck for a single fire energy. That seems actually pretty good. Sometimes there are some games where both you and your opponent or maybe just your opponent has a rougher setup, and they actually have to go through their deck. Like they end up with 20 cards or something, like in the first couple of turns, and then you can actually grind them out a little bit, and then later it comes down to just the number of cards, both players with like 10 cards in their deck. This attack can actually become game changing and can actually run away with a win. So it's something nice to have. And actually the second attack is also pretty interesting for a couple of energy. Grand Flame does 50, and you attach a fire energy card from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. There's a lot of ways to bring energy back from the discard pile into fire energy from the discard pile, like the blacksmiths, for example, which is a prime way to do that. And I think this attack complements the Mega Houndoom pretty well. So If you're building a Mega Houndoom deck, I think you'll want some Houndooms that are non-evolved, so that you can use Grand Flame sometimes, and even Horn Melt, why not? So all-round solid card. As far as the Mega goes though, it kind of feels short because it does charge up really nicely, so it's 2 Fire Energy, which, as I mentioned, you can bring back with a Blacksmith. This attack does 80, and if you discard all energy, it does 80 more damage, so it's 160. We can assume that we can discard energy every single turn, because there's a lot of ways, as I said, to bring them back. There's Blacksmith, there's the basic Houndoom EX, there's the newest Fire Energy that you can discard in an attack and then it reattaches itself. We'll get to that in a second, but yeah, Inferno Fang, it's really easy to deal 160 damage. The problem is this guy needs the Spirit Link to be able to evolve without losing the turn, which means we won't be playing the Muscle Bands. Maybe we can play some Tool Retriever, or maybe we just play Bats in here, or some other way to deal the additional damage. But yeah, just being able to 1-hit KO seems really nicely, but if we are 2-hit KOing, I think it'd just rather be playing Manectrics instead. So yeah, all in all, Houndoom is still a pretty interesting card, Mega Houndoom, so I keep an eye on it as well. Glalie X also seems pretty interesting, both Glalie X and the Mega. So this one, Ice Breath for a single energy, flip a coin if as your opponent's active Pokemon is paralyzed, nothing to write home about, and then instant cooling for a water and a double colorless 50. And if you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, this attack does 100 more damage. So if you actually stick a Muscle Band in there, that's 170. Maybe we can build a deck around having the same amount of cards in our hand as our opponent. I don't think that's easy to do, but if it is, we don't even need to evolve. We just use Glalie and just knock our opponents out in a single hit. Maybe, sometimes, probably. I don't know. If they have a 180 HP Pokemon, that's not going to happen anyway, so we might as well just turn our heads into the Mega Glalie X, which has Cryo Mouth for the same amount of energy, basically, as the previous evolution. Does 100 damage, and if this Pokemon has 10 or more damage counters on it, this attack does 150 more damage, so 250 damage. That's going to knock out all the Megas. Even Wailord X dies from this, but the problem is this Pokemon has to have 10 or more damage counters, and mind you, that's not 10 damage, that's 10 damage counters, so it's 100 damage. It doesn't seem that bad though. It has 220 HP, so unless it is being 1-hit KO'd, the opponent is going to have some trouble, because as soon as this guy passes the 100 damage barrier, suddenly we can just knock everything out. So if the opponent is not careful and they actually attack into Mega Glalie with a Pokemon that has a lot of energy, or even into a Glalie with a Pokemon that has all their energy, and they deal 100 damage or more, and then we evolve this guy and then just get rid of his active Pokemon and all their energies along with it, the opponent is going to have a lot of trouble. So yeah, it seems interesting. We have to test it and see if it works or not, but yeah, it does seem to have some potential while not being totally bonkers like the Mega Mewtwo kind of is. So yeah, I think both Mega Glalie and Mega Houndoom are pretty cool, but I think Mega Mewtwo is the strongest of all the EXs in the set. So let's move into the normal Pokemon that are neither EX or Break. Our first normal Pokemon is going to be Typhlosion. It's a stage 2. It has a very interesting first attack. So for a single Fire Energy, Massive Eruption, you discard the top 5 cards of your deck. This attack does 80 damage times the number of energy cards you discarded. So you actually only need to hit 2 energy and have a Muscle Band on this guy to be killing an EX Pokemon in a single hit for a single energy. The fact that this guy is a stage 2 might be a problem. Hopefully not. But yeah, Massive Eruption does seem pretty interesting. I do want to build this deck and try it out and see if it works. I don't think it will, because once again you're attacking with a stage 2 and I hate attacking with a stage 2 because you just spend so much work just building it, and when you're taking advantage out of the energy it's interesting, but when you're just using it to attack and the opponent knocks it out, it's terrible for you. So yeah, Massive Eruption still pretty interesting. This is definitely a card to keep an eye out on. Octillery, it's one of the most interesting cards in the set, actually. One of the cards that I'm most excited about, at least to try it out. So Abyss Hand, it's an ability that says once during your turn before you attack, you may draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. This is pretty similar to what the Electro did. I think the Electro is still in a format. I think it's from Flashfire or something. And you drew until you had 4 cards in your hand. That card saw some play, but I actually think that the extra card that you draw out of this makes all the difference in the world. Especially since Judge is getting reprinted as a supporter. It's we'll get to that when we get to the supporters, but it basically makes you and your opponent shuffle and draw 4 cards. So Abyss Hand, if you're having judges, if you're playing a Judge, Abyss Hand will always be good after that, because you will always draw an extra card at least. So that does seem really good in those situations. This doesn't seem like the most explosive card. I mean, I don't think it's going to, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to replace the Shaman. Sorry guys, I know it's really expensive, but if you want to set up, Shaman is where it's at, because you can just grab it with an Ultra Ball. Octillery, not so much. You have to build the stage 1, and you have to wait a turn to be able to evolve and all that. I see it more as a mid to late game card, just to, after you spend a lot of resources, you can just recharge your hand using Abyss Hand. So yeah, I still think it's pretty solid, especially since Judge is coming back to the format. So yeah, Octillery, definitely one of the better cards to keep in mind. Vanillux, it has a pretty interesting attack, Frigid Breath, because it locks the opponent from playing supporters or stadiums. It does combine really well with Vileplume, as history has shown us, but it's a stage 2 and it's not a grass type, so we won't be able to evolve it as quickly as we evolve the Vileplume. So yeah, I don't really see Vanillux getting a lot of play, but I think it was worth mentioning. Magnezone, it's a stage 2, and it has a very interesting ability, Magnetic Circuit. As often as you like, during your turn before you attack, you may attach a lightning energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. So this is pretty similar to what Emboar and Blastoise did, only it's for lightning types. Unfortunately, we can't use Archies or Maxes to bring this guy from the discard pile directly into play, so we actually have to evolve, and I don't know how good that is right now. I think, if you guys remember when Blastoise, before the Archies was being played, Blastoise wasn't that great, but maybe the format's rotation did make it better for this type of decks. I mean, there's not a lot of item lock right now, only the Vileplume's decks play that. And those are slow enough that we can actually assemble the Magnezone ourselves from our hand without having to play the rare candy. So maybe it's something worth thinking about. It obviously depends on the Pokemon that are able to attack using lightning energy. And we actually have a pretty interesting one coming next. So Raikou, it's a basic Pokemon. It has 120 HP, which isn't much, but it does have some pretty interesting stuff to it. So the first thing is the ability, Shining Body. If this Pokemon has any lightning energy attached to it, any damage into this Pokemon by attacks is reduced by 20. So this guy comes equipped with a Hard Charm. That's pretty interesting. If you add an Hard Charm in there as well, that's 40 less damage that you're taking with each attack. That's super good, I think. And then Thunder Lance. It's basically Glalie X's attack, only for lightning energy instead of water energy. Because we don't have the rushing ability, we can't use it like we did with Glalie. We're using the Magnezone to charge it up and then rushing in and attacking, and then switching between attackers. But it is an Oni-X, and we will be having the Floatstone in the format. So yeah, maybe Raikou does combine really well with Magnezone. Stunfisk, I'm just mentioning this guy because maybe there's room in some decks for a Revenge Electric type. This guy does hit for 20 plus 80 if some Pokemon was knocked out the previous turn, so it's a Revenge for 100 damage. That's pretty cool for just 2 energy. But still doesn't kill, well, I guess with the Muscle Band it does kill the Rayquazas, but yeah, it's worth considering, I think. Gengar, one of the most hyped cards, I think, from the new set. It's a stage 2, and as you guys know, I hate attacking with stage 2s because you're putting it in a harm's way after you just spent so much energy building it. But this guy actually does have a very interesting attack in Creep Show for a Psychic and a Colossus, so you can use the Stadium to get the Colossus energy out of this guy and just attack with a single energy. If the opponent's active Pokemon has 3 or more damage counters on it, that Pokemon is knocked out. So if we build this guy with bats, I don't think it's going to be that hard to assemble, but at the same time it's a lot of work. It is for 1-hit KOs, but we are attacking with a stage 2 that has 130 HP, which is really easy for a basic Pokemon to hit. Something like a Heatran, for example, can hit for 130 really quickly. So I'm not sure the Gengar is going to see a lot of play. Does seem like a lot of work on a deck building perspective. You have to have the bats and you have to have the Gengar in there. So yeah, I don't know. I'll definitely try it out though, but I don't think it's going to see the top tables in a lot of tournaments. Miss Magus, I think it's worth mentioning just for that Twisted Chant ability. The attack is garbage, but this ability, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, your opponent shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck. Then your opponent draws a number of cards equal to the number of his or her remaining prize cards. There's a lot of his or her, but what this basically does is it's ends effect, but only on your opponent, not on your side. So even if you already drew a lot of prize cards, you won't end yourself, but you play this guy and you end your opponent. That's super good. I don't know if it's worth to play like a stage 1 in your deck just for this effect. Maybe as a 1/1 sometimes, I don't know. Still have to try it out and see how good it really is. But the fact of the matter is that it's a later stage of the game Pokemon, because you don't want to play this guy and just give your opponent extra cards. You want to play it when your opponent is like 2 or 1 prize away from winning. So yeah, maybe it has some space in some decks. I don't know. Meloetta, I really like this guy because it's a basic. Well, I don't think it's anything backbreaking or anything like that, but I do think it's pretty interesting because if your Psychic deck has some trouble dealing with Mega Manetrix, I think this might help. So for single colorless energy, Axel Spin allows you to attach 2 fighting energy cards from your discard pile to this Pokemon, and then you switch it with 1 Pokemon from your bench. And then Primal Rondo does for fighting and 2 colorless energy, the 60 damage. And if this Pokemon has Psychic energy attached to it, it's 110 damage instead. So if the opponent is playing Mega Manetric, it will get knocked out in 1 hit, but you have to play 2 types of energy. The fact that you actually can recharge it itself and just switch into the, I don't know, an Alucha, for example, into the bench because it has free retreat seems pretty interesting to me, so I decided to mention the Meloetta. Yveltal, it's also a pretty interesting Pokemon for a couple of reasons. The first one is the ability. As long as this Pokemon is your active, each Pokemon tool cards in play have no effect. That's, I guess, interesting. If the opponent has Spirit Links, for example, if they evolve, they lose the turn. And then Pitch Black Spear for fighting. A Darkness and a double colorless, the 60 and 60 damage one of your opponent's bench Pokemon EX. It only hits EXs, which is kind of lame. That's kind of sad. I'd love to be hitting the Vileplumes and all that, but it's still a strong attack. I mean, 60 plus 60, it's a lot of damage. But I don't know if you want to play this amount of energy on this guy. If there's probably better stuff to be doing with your energy. Xerneas, it's also a pretty interesting Pokemon. Rainbow Force for a fairy and a double colorless, 10 plus 30 more damage for each different type of Pokemon on your bench. So let's assume we have Skyfield out and we have 8 different types of Pokemon among our Pokemon in the bench. That's 80 times 3 plus 10. That's 150 damage. 250 damage on a basic Pokemon, non-EX Pokemon, for just 3 energy without even having to play the Muscle Band. So maybe there's some deck that we can build with this guy, and even if we are not hitting for 250, maybe if we just hit for 210, for example, that's good enough, or 190 plus a Muscle Band, that does seem great. So maybe I actually think this guy might find a home. I think we already have a deck for it in Expanded with a Big Basics Aromatisse Toolbox deck, or Fairy Box, what you want to call it, because it will be able to hit for a lot of damage. Even just 5 Pokemon, and you hit for 160 plus a Muscle Band, that's 180. That's really good. So Rainbow Force, definitely something to keep in mind. Second attack, Power Creation 80, and then if this Pokemon heal damage this turn, this 80 more damage. So yeah, maybe we can also use that in the Fairy Box decks, because we can heal damage with the Max Potion, and maybe this attack will end up hitting more damage than the first attack does. So yeah, I don't know. This does seem like a pretty interesting card to keep in mind. Hoot, sorry. It's a really cool basic Pokemon for 60 HP, and then for the double colorless energy, Proclaim the Night. Your opponent can play any item cards from his or her hand during his or her next turn. So this item locks your opponent, like Seismitoad does, but this guy does no damage. The reason this little guy is here is because of the evolution. They combine really well with each other, so you can use Hoot Hoots, Proclaim the Night, and then your opponent does something on his turn and passes, and then you evolve, and you use High Flight for the same amount of energy as the previous guy's attack. Each player reveals his or her hand. This attack does 20 damage times the number of item cards revealed. That's a lot of damage. If you have 5, that's 100 damage. If your opponent has 5, that's 200 damage. And if you combine this guy, for example, with Vileplume, that seems really interesting. So you can have the Hoot Hoot and just lock your opponents out of items early if you can't assemble the Vileplume. And then you assemble the Vileplume, but you're going to item lock yourself. But it doesn't matter because at that point you can just evolve into Noctowl and start attacking. And the opponent can't play items, and you can play items, but you're dealing a lot of damage anyway, so who cares, right? And it's an Oni-X, and it does seem like pretty easy to assemble. And it's a basic type, a colorless type Pokemon, which is really easy to splash into any decks that we want. So yeah, I think this guy might see some play. It does seem like one of the most interesting Pokemon in the set. We have Smeargle in here, and the attack is garbage, but the ability is pretty interesting. Once during your turn, before you attack, you may switch one basic energy attached to one of your active Pokemon with a different type of basic energy on your discard pile. So I can see this with the newer Mewtwo EX. Kind of seems like it's going to be needing this guy, because you can play the Battle Compressor and then switch the energy. But yeah, I don't really know how good that's going to be, and if it's really worth it to play this guy. I guess as a one-off in some decks might be worth it, even in Mega Manetric decks, but you are spending bench space for it. But yeah, definitely on the watch list, but we have to try it out before we know if it's good or not. Last Pokemon that I want to talk about is Empoleon. This guy has the ability Dignified Fighter. Each of your basic Pokemon's attacks does 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. That does seem interesting, but I think this guy is bad for the same reason that the Machamp that increased the damage on the fighting Pokemons is bad. The fact that you're going through a lot of work building a stage 2 or just using Maxes, or in this case Arches, to put a guy on your bench just to deal an extra 20 damage. I think there's so much stuff that you can do that's less work than that also does more damage to your opponent's Pokemon. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this card at all. I've seen a lot of people hyping it, but I don't think it's great. And now let's just jump into the items, I guess, in the supporters and trainer cards in general. We start with Assault Vest. Any damage done to you, the Pokemon this card is attached to by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon that have any special energy attached to them is reduced by 40. I don't really know why you would play this card instead of straight up Enhanced Hammer. If you know your opponent is playing special energy, I think you'd just rather try and make them not attack at all than deal less damage to you. So yeah, I think Assault Vest, plus it's an item, you have to it's a tool that you have to play, so you can't really play this thing and the Muscle Band. You have to opt between one of them. So I just rather go with Enhanced Hammers and the Muscle Bands of this world and just forget about Assault Vest altogether. Bridget, it's a supporter. Search your deck for one basic Pokemon EX or 3 basic Pokemon except for Pokemon EX and put them on the bench. Shuffle your deck afterwards. I'm not a real fan of this card, to be honest. I know it's interesting and it's toolboxy, and I like the fact that you can choose, but I don't think this is great. I'd rather just play Pokemon Fan Club. I mean, grabbing 3 basic Pokemon is cool, but if you think about it, what decks only play basic Pokemon and no EX Pokemon? I guess only Vespiquen decks, and in that decks I think there's better supporters to be played other than Bridget. Just the fact that with the Pokemon Fan Club you can grab one of the Pokemons that you need to set up, like an Aromatisse or a Bronzong or something like that, or a Bronzong, sorry, and a Shaymin, that seems so much better than Bridget. The fact that you can't really choose, I mean, here you either draw the Shaymin or you draw the basic Pokemon. You can't just draw one of the basic non-EXs and the Shaymin, and I think that's a bummer. And I think Bridget just seems like it misses the point completely. So I'd rather just play Pokemon Fan Club instead of Bridget. Buddy Buddy Rescue, pretty interestingly named card. Each player puts a Pokemon from his or her discard pile into his or her hand. It does allow your opponent to do that, and your opponent chooses first. I think there's better ways to grab Pokemon from the discard pile. There's Sacred Ash to shuffle it into the deck, and there's Revive to bring it directly into play. So yeah, I don't really see this thing being good. I guess you can use it against Night March, weirdly, to make them grab back the Pokemon, but they might have non-Night March Pokemon in there, and they might just return that instead. So yeah, I don't think this is great. Fisherman, that's an interesting supporter. It's actually a reprint, and you choose 4 basic energy cards from your discard pile and put them into your hand. So this is similar to what the Superior Energy Retrieval does, only this is a supporter, so you can actually use it item locked. Yeah, it's interesting. I can even see this card being played in Expanded like as a one-off in an Archie's deck or something like that, because sometimes you get item locked in, you can't bring the energy back. So yeah, maybe this card can see some play. I don't know. It does seem interesting, though. It's a very cool effect to have on a supporter, I think. Floatstone, now we're talking. There's really not much to talk about this card because it's not a new card, but it's so good, and we clearly miss Floatstone a lot. It's really one of the best cards to have. The fact that you can just stick it into a Pokemon and retreat for free is pretty good. And I think, well, we don't have the Keldeo, but I think this is still going to be a staple of the format. So, Giovanni Scheme, supporter. Choose 1, draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. And during this turn, your Pokemon attacks does 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. I like the fact that this is this card allows you to choose, so I can see this being played as a one-off in decks, especially decks that play the Battle Compressor, that you can just use the VS Seeker to grab the Giovanni Scheme, but it doesn't seem like the greatest card ever. I mean, if you're grabbing it, you're probably going for the damage, if you're grabbing it with the VS Seeker and the Battle Compressor, because otherwise you just go for a better draw supporter, right? You just rather go for the Sycamore instead. So I don't know if having 20 extra damage from a supporter is that great, and if it isn't, I think that's the part of the card that's most important. That's the do or don't for this card, is the 20 damage being good or not. Having the ability to draw cards is interesting as an additional upside sometimes, the extra flexibility, but that's not the point of this card, I think, because there's just better ways to draw cards. Oh, sorry, I opened the Spirit Link. I didn't mean to. I don't really need to talk about them. Heavy Ball is also getting reprinted. Also pretty cool. I really don't have a list of cards that can be grabbed with Heavy Ball, but it was played back when it was in the format, and now that it's getting reprinted, it's pretty cool. It's a very versatile card to have when you're building decks. I really like having this type of cards that you can choose from. And Heavy Boots, it's a tool, and if the Pokemon this card is attached to as a retreat cost of 3 colors or more, that Pokemon gets extra 20 HP and it cannot be confused. It's really interesting, the part about confusion. Maybe there's some combo that I'm missing, but adding extra 20 HP, I don't think it's good enough. Maybe the part of the confusion is, but the fact that you get 20 extra HP, I'd just rather play Archarm at that point. Because it just cures 20 damage from each attack, so it's like you have 20 extra HP, and if the opponent actually attacks you twice, that's like you have 40 extra HP. So it's better to play Archarm instead of this thing, unless confusion becomes a real thing. I don't know if it's going to or not. Judge, supporter, and I think this card is insane. Each player shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck and draws 4 cards. Imagine playing this thing on the first turn after you have built your bench and just played a lot of Chaymins and went through a lot of cards, and you play this thing and your opponent actually doesn't draw an Ultra Ball or a Shaymin. They will be in trouble. I guarantee you that. This card might... I mean, it's not as good as N because it doesn't allow you to draw 6 cards in your first hand. So if you draw this as a supporter and you don't really have a Shaymin or anything else, you might not want to play it yourself. But the thing is, I don't think that's going to happen a lot. I mean, you're having Judge and nothing else other than it. And even if you do, it's 4 extra cards that you're seeing. So maybe you draw the Ultra Ball that you desperately need out of those 4 cards. But the fact that you just put your opponent down to 4 cards on the first hand as you play your supporter. It's like you're playing a surprise red card. You're gaining extra value out of your supporter. It's like your supporter not only shuffles your hand but also plays a red card on your opponent. That's really cool, I think. I think Judge is going to be seeing a lot of play. I'm actually going to start playing like 4 on every deck and going from there. Maybe some decks need less. Maybe it's not as good as I think it is, but yeah, I think it's totally bonkers. Maybe some of you guys have played with Judge before because it's a reprint and you can tell me how good it was back then. But I think it's totally a strong card as it is. Parallel City. Interesting, very interesting stadium because it has 2 effects. You actually have to choose the direction you play it in, and it has 1 effect for one player and 1 effect from the other, and you choose which effect goes on each player. So the blue side says this card may be placed either way up when played, and the player on this side of the card can only have 3 Pokemon on his or her bench. That's really stifling against a lot of decks. Some decks really need a lot of Pokemon on the bench. Not even decks that need it for damage like the Raichu. I'm even talking about decks that just need to have Pokemon on the bench to do some tricks with them, to use the abilities and stuff like that. So this can really stiffen the opponent's ability to set up. And then the red side, this card may be placed either way when it's played, once again, and then the attack of each grass, fire, and water Pokemon on this player's side do 20 less damage. I think this is interesting, but I don't think this card is the reason you play the stadium. I don't think you're playing a stadium just to cut 20 damage out of the grass, fire, and water Pokemon types. I think you'll be playing it for the blue side to put your opponent on the blue side, and you're trying to avoid the red side yourself. So you're probably going to be playing this on decks that don't play grass, fire, or water Pokemon, or at least don't play a lot of them. So yeah, I think this card is basically to put your opponent on the blue side and not on the red side. Sorry. Reserve Ticket says, flip a coin if heads, search your deck for 1 card and shuffle your deck. Put that card on top of your deck. I don't really like this card. So on average you're getting half a card, so that means if you play 4 of these you're getting 2 cards and you don't even get it in your hand, you just put it on top. I don't think this is a great card. I'd just rather play, I don't know, Via Seeker. Even Acrobike is better than this. So I just rather play with Acrobike instead of the Reserve Ticket. It's one of my least favorite items on this set. Skyla is getting reprinted. Nothing really that relevant to say about the card other than it's getting reprinted. Might see some play in some decks. It's a very nice effect to have because it grabs the stadiums and stuff like that. We didn't really have an easy way to do that. So maybe the Giratina decks will like Skyla, especially if you're playing once again the Battle Compressors and the Via Seekers, because you can just use a Via Seeker and a Battle Compressor to grab a stadium out of nowhere and just lock your opponent with Giratina afterwards. That seems really nice, and that's just a use for Skyla that I just invented from the top of my head just now. So there's probably a lot of stuff that you can do with it, and it's really nice to have flexible cards like this. Whew, we're getting close to the end. So Super Rod, also a reprint, and Juicy reprint at that. So shuffle 3 of any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards from your discard pile back into your deck. Let's ignore the Neo Genesis print because that's not what the card does right now. It's the Noble Victories print that we are looking at. So you shuffle Pokemon and basic energy from your discard pile to your deck. It's kind of a mix between Sacred Ash and Energy Recycle, only you can only shuffle 3, but it's a combination, so most decks just want Super Rod instead of either of Sacred Ash or Energy Recycle. So yeah, Super Rod, it's going to be the default choice. Sometimes you will opt for another card, but yeah, really, really nice reprint in here. And finally, we get to the energy, special energy. We got the burning energy. You can only attach it to fire Pokemon, as these last type fire energies, type energies have been, like the fighting, strong energy, and then the mystery energy for the psychic types, and the flash energy for the electric. So this one can only be attached to fire Pokemon, and it provides a fire energy, and if this card is discarded by an effect of an attack from the fire Pokemon discard is attached to, reattach it to that Pokemon. So it's really nice to have this card and use it on your Houndoom, or even on your sorry, what's the name of the Camerupt. Oh, I almost forgot about that one. Yeah, it seems a really nice card for Camerupt. I always thought that Camerupt was getting better with Shaymin in the format because you can play other supporters other than the ones that draw you cards with a Shaymin, so you can just discard a million cards with an Ultra Balls and stuff like that, discard energies, and use Shaymin to draw into the Blacksmith, and then play the Blacksmith into the Camerupt and attack. So I think that deck is a little bit better, and now that we have this energy, it might just get a lot better. I mean, this one can actually be removed by the the enhanced hammers of this world, but yeah, maybe it's not good in the Camerupt deck at all. I don't know. It does seem good with the Houndoom though, because it's 2 energy, and you can also use Blacksmith with the Houndoom. You don't really have to rely on burning energy. So yeah, it's definitely a card worth considering, for sure. Definitely a card worth considering. So yeah, that's the set for you guys. I hope you enjoy this. I hope I didn't go on for rambling for too long. Tell me what you think, if you agree or not with my assessments, and I guess I'll see you guys next time. Bye!